Okay, it's 8:02 on Wednesday, July 6th. I would like to call the special council meeting of the city of Twinsburg to order. Shannon, would you call the roll?
Mr. Scafidi?
Here.
Mr. Cerisi?
Here.
Ms. McFerrin? Here. Mrs. Stauffer? Mr. Roden?
Here.
Mr. Fury?
Here.
Mr. Steele?
Here. Okay, everybody please rise for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Father, we seek your guidance for the business that is before us. In planning for the future of the city of Twinsburg, give us vision. Guide us to make decisions that are not self-serving, but for the betterment of our community, so we can continue to move forward in a positive direction. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Next, we will move on to audience participation. I do want to remind everyone that this is a special meeting. There's one resolution on the agenda tonight, Resolution 75-2016, with regards to applying for funding, OPWC funding, for State Route 91 Darrell Road. And so before we move into audience participation, I know some people signed up, and that is the only item that we can discuss tonight, whether it be from the audience or on council. So with that being said, and there is a 5-minute limit, that being said, Shannon, who do we have?
First, we have Bob Thews.
Good evening, Bob Thews, 2229 Demi Drive in Meadowwood, in the Meadowwood community. Resolution 75-2016, if approved tonight, will be a tacit approval of this whole council to put the Meadowwood Circle in. Okay, that will be tacit approval if it's approved by this council, unless there are some stipulations made that there's eventually going to be another vote on that. But right now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to make my points on the reason why we don't want that circle. You know, that circle would be a great idea if we had multiple roads going through that intersection. But we don't. We just have 2 roads. Okay? It would also be a really good idea if it was meant to improve the flow of traffic. But, you know, I've been in that traffic jam before. That traffic jam starts at Post Road. Okay? You put a circle in that thing. All you do now is create that line goes straight past all the side roads all the way down to Post Road and blocks anybody from entering from the side roads. Whereas with a light, at least you got a chance to get in. You don't now. You won't if you put that circle in. And finally, that circle is being put in a residential area, okay? That's the only circle I've ever heard of going in a residential area like that. And my concern about that is because the foot traffic going across that road is very heavy. The pedestrian traffic is very heavy, and the concern there is from the standpoint that a pedestrian, I'm sure walking on the inside they won't, but when somebody's coming out of that circle somewhere, you're meant to move. You don't stop. And my concern at that point in time is somebody's going to come out of there and nail pedestrians. So, yeah, we're going to eliminate T-bones, but I'm not sure we're going to not eliminate some injured pedestrians some way or other. So, as far as I'm concerned, you know, either if this is voted in and agreed to, then I understand, and I will make sure everybody understands that this council believes in ignoring the voice of the people. That's all I have.
Thank you. You know, just to be clear, this legislation tonight is not whether we have a roundabout or not. That legislation was passed a year and a half ago, I believe, at least a year and a half ago, by the council that was sitting here at the time. And a roundabout at that time was passed and approved. Tonight's legislation is not whether we put in a roundabout or don't put in a roundabout. This is whether we apply for funding for State Route 91 based on the current plan at hand. So I just want to be clear on that so everybody understands that. Next, Shannon.
Next, we have Mike DeSillo.
Mike DeSilla, 11296 Palmer Lane. 8 years ago, I came up here and opposed the roundabouts, stating that the council, this present council, accepted because Mr. Steele and Ms. McFerrin were not on council. But the rest of you people were on council, and I voiced my objections to 2 roundabouts. I said 1 might work, but not 2. I'm still opposed to them, and I think that this council still has an obligation and can change to a conventional intersection at Ethan's and 91, which would be a lot safer. I question every one of you on council, with the exception of Mr. Ceresi and Mr. Fury, who have met with me. Mr. Yates, who's now the mayor, met with me for about 45 minutes one time, but never had a follow-up meeting. But if any of you read the report, all you had to do is go to the summary. And the summary of this report 8 years ago said that either option, conventional intersections or roundabouts, were going to improve the flow of traffic on Route 91. But the former mayor insisted on a roundabout. And this council was responsible for allowing the roundabout to go in at her wishes. But if you read this report, you would know that you could have chose either one of them. You went the more expensive route because the funding was better from the state and federal funding, which was a bad option. I still would like to say one thing. On the simulation model that the study was made by, they said that they would improve the traffic flow on Route 91 in off-peak hours. We don't need improved traffic flow in off-peak hours. We need improved traffic flow in peak hours, in the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour. We're not going to get that. It also said that there's going to be a traffic jam on Glenwood and 91 from the West Lake. They further said that the result is not consistent with the capacity analysis, and we believe the simulation model is being pessimistic at this location. Why would it be pessimistic at one location and not any others? But I don't know how many of you council people read this. I doubt that many of you have. I have. Finally, with this resolution tonight, I have a couple of questions. Number one, when did we know that July 9th was the deadline for this resolution to pass? When Mr. Yates was elected mayor, I thought that we were going to get some change that would not be the status quo that we had for the last 16 years. That's not proving to be the case. I didn't support Mr. Yates, and everybody knows I didn't. But the point is that if this legislation the deadline was the July 9th, 9 weeks prior to it was when this legislation should have been introduced so that it could be properly read 3 times and taken effect on the last reading and 30 days to make law. That's all it needed. That's the end of my comments. Thank you very much. I would be opposed to this tonight.
Thank you. Shannon?
That's it.
That's it? Okay, next we have the legislation. We have Resolution 75, 2016. Well, before we move into that, anybody on council want to have anything to say?
I'll wait till we're in discussion. Yeah, me too.
Okay. Amy, would you like to speak?
The application, good evening, council. Thank you for convening tonight. The application before you is for state funding through Ohio Public Works, which is additional funding into the federal funding that we already have. And I think I explained in an email earlier today, the federal funding goes from a certain fiscal year to a certain point in time to a certain point in time, which is a July to a July, which matches the current Ohio Public Works funding round. So to put the 2 funding together, this is the application that would have to move forward. I would love for you guys to put on the agenda or a future agenda discussion on some of the questions about the roundabout and some of the information brought up today. Understand that's not a topic today. I think we could provide some answers to those types of things, but I would love for you to put it on a topic if you wanted to do it at the next meeting or whatever. This application needs to be in to even be considered. There's a whole process for the consideration. I sent you guys the schedule of how the review process goes through. There won't even be a review until mid-October associated with, are we even in the running for it? So I think there's plenty of time to discuss other issues around it. You lose the opportunity to put an application in if you don't get it in by the deadline, and that's really what we're talking about here is, the roughly $500,000 of funding for the project. So if you have any questions on that, the application packets usually come out mid-May. I believe that's about when it came out this year. It could have been the beginning of May. I was working on 3 other applications at the time, so for different funding. But that's when the applications for Ohio Public Works Fund does come out. If you go back to the beginning of these projects, way back when, I could probably pull a PowerPoint that was put on by GPD saying we would pursue alternate funding as we went through the project. And that's all this is giving you an opportunity for grant funding, which is funding that's not a loan, doesn't have to be repaid, to make up some of the portion that is the local share that we have against this project right now. We have, on the application, we have $3.44 million from federal towards the project currently.
Mr. Ferry.
Is the $3.44 million just phase 3, or is that a combination of all 3 phases?
Nope, that is for the construction phase for this portion of the project. We have received in excess of that. We received about that same amount of money for the construction phase on phase 1, as well as received funds for engineering associated with the overall project.
And the grant application tonight is for state funding. It doesn't concern the federal funding.
This is for state funding through Ohio Public Works Commission.
Amy, you and I had a long conversation today about several issues regarding the roundabout, or around this grant application. You stated that even if we were against the roundabout and had those questions and had that survey and that up or down vote that we discussed, that you would be able to rescind this application prior to Thursday, October 6th.
And what I recommended, October 6th or October 14th before their review on that. So we're not in the mix, so that they can put together a list that would basically be a true list to provide to the state. And the state basically would provide the funding. When I say they, I mean the local NRAC that reviews these.
So if we did that survey and got an up or down vote on whether we were going forward with the round straightaway, if we had put this application through, we could still rescind it based on that, because we would have to do additional engineering work to change the drawings that are currently a roundabout only. That's what is attached to this grant application.
We attach the set of plans, which are a stage 3 set of plan, which have roundabouts with hawk pedestrian signals for crossing, and the plans I brought for review if anybody wants to see. But we have to submit the set of plans as well as a certified engineer's estimate that GPD put together, as well as certifying % completeness of those plans.
I do recall looking at the numbers that we had from 2008 that it was less expensive to put in a traditional intersection than a roundabout. No?
Not from the study. The study had a whole matrix associated with those two. The funds are very similar. I might have to pull the matrix of funding. Do you have it?
It's $50,000 less. Okay.
In terms of that, I remember them being very, very similar. For a $3.4 million project, $50,000 would probably slip my mind as far as which one was more or less
Actually,
expensive.
58. But,
Didn't change.
and it uses slightly less land as well. The traditional intersection uses less land.
Less land, more property owners impacted, more lateral land along the corridor. The more land is actually right at the intersection.
One of the challenges I think we have with the roundabout at this location is that I don't know how much the light at Lisa Lane was taken into account at this time. I don't believe it was there in the 2008 study, which is almost 9 years ago. And we're having challenges with Lisa, as we've talked about right now, mechanical or whatever. I mean, I'm seeing backups, significant backups there now. And I've also talked to some Solon council people at Lena Inan's restaurant, Chicago Deli, and they don't seem pretty adamant that they're not that's a major issue for their residents to turn left. that's why they put that in, and I think it's only been in 6 years, but I don't have that off the top of my head. So that wasn't even there when the original traffic study was done.
When the original traffic study wasn't, GPD did look at that. In 2014, we extensively went and looked at both options. I believe the design engineer over there at that time, or at least GPD is the design engineer, their traffic engineer at this point in time, so they have looked at both sections. As I stated earlier, I don't really want to go into the whole design there, but there is something if you want to look further into that. But it was a question where I think I have consistency between engineers between the two communities. So I think we discussed that earlier. So
Thank you.
Did we not have, I mean, what we got from, what Joanne got from Shannon, did it not have both pictures of both designs?
you had, when we started the whole project, we had we went through the whole process looking at alternatives. We did it in April of 2011. I think the alternate intersections traffic study was looked at and put together and presented. It looked at both options there.
I mean, there's designs of it.
Well, not designs.
Well,
There's a
what
preliminary layout.
Okay.
Even in that preliminary layout, that roundabout geometrics is not the current within the actual designed set of plans. Those are preliminary conceptual until you get into the meat and potatoes of actually doing the. If we could do that cheap of a design, yeah, on a paper napkin, yeah, we would be good. That wouldn't cost us I think this project to design cost over $600,000.
Council. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Amy, do you have any idea how long it would take to redesign the intersection and turn it back into a signalized intersection?
It's going to take some time. There's things that you can run consecutively, paying for it 100% as yourself. Right up until this point, we've been federally funded as well on the design process for the project that we've completed. With that, there's a whole we complete a step.
I understand that there's that.
So you can run things on top of it. I don't know the exact time period. I can tell you in 2014, when we examined this before which design to go through, it was going to take about 5 weeks to get the intersection justification study reevaluated, re-reviewed, and resubmitted and approved. That would have been one step to go to the other.
So
You could run things consecutively. I mean, you can run that, and you could say, well, we're assuming we'll get that passed, and you can start work right away on the design work, so you can get to right away. We are in right away purchase right now for what we have designed to meet schedule, so that we can get the utilities out of the way, which was a little bit of a problem in the first stage because they did not complete per what they had told us they were going to do in November before the July they were supposed to be out of the way, and there's still utilities out there
Okay.
a year after they were supposed to be gone.
But my question is, okay, I asked way back at the second meeting that I attended that we draw up legislation about this intersection. My intent then was if we were going to change it, we would have more time and not run into these time constraints that we are going to do if we change it in October. Okay? I have a problem. I asked for that to be added to the agenda tonight, and I was refused by Mayor Yates that this is not on the agenda tonight, that we vote against that roundabout. Okay? I have faith in you that if we decide we're going to change the roundabout and go to a signalized intersection, that you will be able to run hard on this and get it done. Okay? But the more time...
As I told Mr. Racy when we discussed it before, I will work diligently, but I cannot make any promises in terms of what we can do.
Well,
I said we can run consecutive things and attempt to do that, and there are some things where I think a further discussion would be
what
pertinent.
it is. We have to...
But-
the deadline is July of next year, I think you've told me, the sale of the job or however...
Well, but that's the sale of the job. The sale of the job is in the fiscal years. Their fiscal year starting July, which is also when this grant application gets awarded. You can't move on the project without having the application signed. So, but it takes over a year to get through the right-of-way process. even if that's the issue in getting the design and getting the right-of-way. It's a federal process to get that right-of-way, because if we're still spending federal money for the construction, we can't skip hurdles associated with that process.
I understand, but we're doing that federal right-of-way stuff right now.
Right, but it's 13 parcels will change right-of-way with your process. Right now, a lot of our right-of-way is temporary right-of-way. We're buying, as we said, at the intersection is the main purchase portion of that right-of-way. We're in the process of that. You go to a different typical section, I said now the right-of-way extends, and we need more from the center line to more in the backyards of all those properties to put the turn lane. Because now you're talking about developing a 5-lane section, because you're basically developing that turn lane in there. So right now in this set of plans, the sidewalk pretty much remains where the sidewalk is. If you do a different thing, then the sidewalk moves roughly 5-6 feet back further, which then then it goes into the utility easements that are out there. And then you have to also get utility easement, so there's right away that's impacted, that's in addition to the actual physical property as far as utility coordination and things like that. So it is a process. I'm not saying
And
it's
there
not
will be
something we can't do. I'm saying I will do the best I can. I've looked at some of the red flags, and there are some red flags, and there is some time associated with doing it. But like I said, for this application, if we don't even put this on the table as an application for funding, we've basically taken that off the table to coincide with federal funding. And I think that would be, till you actually have your discussion at a future meeting and figure out what you're going to do, then you're missing the boat on potential $500,000 towards the project.
Amy, my question is, what happens to the funding that we've received so far? Okay, if we decide to go ahead and change this to a traditional intersection, where do we go with the funding that we've received? What happens with that?
It all depends if you meet schedule, and what there's certain paybacks if you don't actually do anything. We'd have to investigate more if we actually do a construction project that meets the requirements. There may not be a payback associated with it, but there is money out of the pocket to do a different design. So between the design, the right-of-way, and all those, you're going to be spending money. And like I said, we can discuss all of that in depth if you guys want to put all those types of questions to me in an email and put it for discussion. I can try and research some of those questions, and we can go through that process in terms of what we've got going, and you'll know where we sit. And if you choose to go that direction, I would then probably recommend another special meeting after I negotiate a new contract, so that it doesn't slow me down.
Okay.
But again,
All right.
what I'm looking for is this, so at least this is on the table, and then I can work with this in terms of moving forward with maybe getting some funding.
Okay. Mr. Roden has another comment.
I just wanted to just clarify with Mr. DeSillo what he had said, because actually in the beginning of the first vote, I actually voted no with Mr. Ceresi, and Mr. Fury was not part of that vote. He actually voted yes. So I'm not sure what exactly you've talked to him now about, but I just want to clarify that with you, that I actually was a no vote at the time. So I don't agree with your complete comments on what you had said earlier. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Mr. Ceresi, you had another comment.
Amy, I just wanted to say two things that are they're sort of off topic, but number one, I hope you don't look at any of this as something personal. This is obviously just stuff coming at you, and we have all these questions and so forth, and council changed and all that stuff. Second, I just wanted to thank you for taking your time and coming. This isn't necessarily part of your job, showing up for this kind of stuff, but you have taken the time, and I, for one, appreciate your being here. So thanks.
And coming off of vacation. We appreciate that as well. Thank you for doing that.
Thank
I
you.
wasn't going to get into that.
That was nice. All right, Council, any other comments?
So, as a group, is anybody opposed to finishing the survey that's been talked about, or having an up and down vote that Mr. Steele's been talking about? And I had those conversations also with Mayor Gates right after the election. When I walked Meadowwood, people would answer the door, and the first thing they'd say was, "Where are you at off a roundabout?" And I heard that. Mr. Yates disagrees with that. He thinks there's a different. But I'm saying that's what I heard. And at the same time, what's changed for me in the last 2 years is the is the light at Lisa. I'm just really, since I've been leaving at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, going in there and coming back through that way, I'm really just, I'm challenged with how that's going to work. And the 2008 study, which is 9 years old now, and there's some updates, which I'm not really comfortable with, I wanted to look again. So I would support going with the grant application, knowing that we can pull it by October if we were, as a group, willing to have that vote wherever it goes. Have that survey done, and not an in-depth, 1 or 2 questions. We can send that out to the residents and have a push button yes or no. Just see what we get. As well as I'm sincerely concerned with the traffic study on Lisa Lane, and I know that those things have been talked about, but they haven't been taken advantage. I think we need to get some momentum to do that, or if we're not, and council has the ability to do those things. So, is anybody opposed to those?
I would like to discuss it further, probably at a caucus meeting.
Okay.
And we could discuss it at our next caucus meeting. We'll put that on the agenda. Anybody opposed to doing that, putting it on the agenda, the next caucus?
You mean next Tuesday?
I have
Yeah.
a problem
Well, actually, I was looking for whether you
either tonight or none.
We can't discuss that tonight.
Yeah,
Sure we
that,
can.
It's,
Sure can.
It's not
No.
part of it.
it's not part of,
it's not part of the funding.
this agenda
We
tonight.
haven't gone to a motion to this. We're having a discussion with the engineer.
Exactly, but, and it was with regards to Resolution 75, 2016. Yeah, that's what it's about tonight. I'd be more than happy to discuss it further at the next caucus meeting. We'll put it on the agenda. And we'll make the caucus even earlier, if you'd like. Well, we have a finance meeting, but we can always change that as well.
And a public hearing.
And a public hearing.
That's right. I don't think it's going to happen next week.
My personal opinion is I don't want to wait. I didn't want to wait. I wanted to talk about tonight, and the mayor just arbitrarily and unilaterally told me I couldn't have it on the agenda tonight. So, if you ask me, we either talk about it tonight. I even offered to back off on it. We could table it from tonight and talk about it the next council meeting, so that Maureen could be here to talk about it. But that, unfortunately, wasn't allowed. So my personal opinion is, we vote this, I'm voting against it, and that's the way it is.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Anybody else have any other discussion?
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
The question I asked about when did we know that July 9th was the deadline?
She answered that.
And it's actually July 8th, and it was July 7th, which is what I told them at the last council meeting, up until a week ago. And it was actually before that. It was the application comes out with May with the schedule, so it wasn't posted until May on the Summit County Economic Development website. Legislation also accompanying my request for legislation includes the application of what the application we're submitting. So their legislation refers to an exhibit, which is the application, which shows the breakdown of all the funding and the background information associated with that. Based on the set of plans and plan readiness, I had asked for that in May from my contractor that basically is hired to do this, and received that to put the package together. So it was not. It's on an emergency reading tonight. Correct. It was not on an emergency clause at the council meeting. So.
Okay. Okay, very good.
One other question.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this no longer necessary to be an emergency?
It requires the application to include legislation. Okay.
Approved legislation.
Right. Approved legislation. What we will do is we will submit unsigned legislation with this application. It's not complete. It basically doesn't go in effect with 10 days. It's basically showing that we have approved the legislation. I'm not even saying that they're basically not going to throw it out because it doesn't have signed legislation. I'm going to tell you they'd throw it out if you don't have any legislation before you submit your application, if you haven't even processed the approval. So I'm skating in the gray. I'm hoping to still salvage close to $500,000. It makes me sick not being able to do that. If you either way you move forward, the opportunity goes whatever. But providing the application with what the vote is on the bottom, it won't be. The mayor's not here to sign it anyway, and we'll submit the signed application after the 10-day waiting period. The signed legislation after the 10-day waiting period. But I will submit a copy of the legislation and the vote that basically was taken on the legislation.
Okay. Anything else? Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Okay, Shannon. Next, we'll move on to legislation. We have Resolution 75, 2016.
A resolution authorizing the city engineer to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement Program and to execute contracts as required for the State Route 91 widening from Glenwood to Solon and declaring an emergency.
Okay, I'll make a motion. As you just said, Mr. Fury, we don't need an emergency on this. Is council comfortable that I make the motion to adopt this as a non-emergency? Or would you prefer to amend it and remove the emergency? Anybody have any thought on it?
You'd be better off amending it, I think. I don't care either way personally, but
I have a problem that we're sending this out without the mayor's signature on it. I believe the application requires that the mayor signs it as the man who can enter into the agreement.
Wait a minute, we're not to that part yet. I've asked. Yeah,
agree with you,
it's a
sir.
separate issue, yeah. So, does anybody have a
I make a
preference?
motion that we remove the emergency clause from Resolution 75, 2016.
All right, I'll second that. Any discussion? Shannon, call the roll.
Mr. Fury?
Yes.
Mr. Scafidi?
Yes.
Mr. Roden?
Yes.
Mr. Cerisi?
yes.
Ms. McFerrin?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
No.
Okay. That's 5-1. Okay, now I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution 75, 2016. Is there a second? Ms. McFerrin seconds. Any discussion? Okay, Shannon, call the roll.
Mr. Scafidi?
Yes.
Ms. McFerrin?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
No.
Mr. Cerisi?
No.
Mr. Roden?
Yes.
And Mr. Fury?
Yes.
Okay, Resolution 75, 2016 passes 4-2. Passes 4-2. Okay, that's it. Next, we'll move on to excuse absent members. I make a motion that we excuse Maureen Stauffer from tonight's meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Roden seconds. Any discussion? Shannon, call the roll.
Mr. Scafidi?
Yes.
Mr. Roden?
Yes.
Mr. Cerisi?
Yes.
Mr. Fury?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Ms. McFerrin?
Yes.
Okay. All right, she's excused, and that's it. We will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.